You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
And welcome to the show today, guys. So much to dive into with this past week's episode, talking about this incredible concept of what Bradley did, making the case for part-time, and really, honestly, even probably more relevant for our community, creating your dream job. I think this is going to be a very valuable conversation. To help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today, who over the last week became a BBC superstar.
Wow, that's quite a lead-in. Yeah, it's been a...
But wait, let me just set that up. You were featured on a short 2.5-minute video on BBC. It's been viewed over 1.4 million times and was the most watched BBC video for over 3 days on bbcnews.com.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's hard to wrap your mind around, honestly. Yeah, I think it's up over 2 million views at this point, and it was the most popular video on the BBC worldwide for 2+ days. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I guess it speaks, though, Jonathan, to the power of FI, to the ability to not need to work in your 30s, which was the title they come up with. And I think this resonates with people. It really does, seeing a normal family. And that was what was cool about it. And we'll link to this in the show notes. But I mean, it was just me and my wife and my daughters and just showing how we're living. And when you see the simplicity and the normalcy of a family like that who has really turned their lives upside down in the best possible way and kind of taking this step off the hamster wheel, people can see that and say, wow, maybe I can do that too.
And you know what's interesting about this is it was a lot of what you just said, but the title of the clip was, and this is barely clickbait. I mean, it's barely clickbait. We stopped needing to work in our 30s. When someone clicked on that, they got a 2.5-minute video on the basics, the very basics of the why of FI. And honestly, Danny said this to me when she watched it. Laura, your wife, who was featured in that little clip with you, was the perfect messenger for what this is about. And this wasn't like this, hey, check out my Tesla in my garage and all my cool stuff. This was a fact that this normal family with normal income was able to achieve something remarkable by looking at the problem just slightly differently. And I mean, just as an objective viewer of this, I looked at it and I said, you guys encapsulated what we are trying to convey so perfectly in that 2.5 clip. And it is a compliment to you and Laura, but it's also a compliment to the fellow that put this video clip together, this journalist that put it together, because it feels authentic.
Yeah, it really did. And it's a funny story, Jonathan. Actually, the guy who did put it together is Glenn Anderson, and he's an old friend of mine from high school. I hadn't spoken with him in about 20 years at this point. He heard about FI and saw me posting on Facebook, or somehow ended up in our Choose FI group and decided to do this little feature for the BBC. And yeah, I mean, it came out as well as I could have possibly hoped. And Jonathan, it's cool. I actually didn't mention this to you, but I got a LinkedIn message yesterday from my old college roommate who's like, congrats on the BBC feature. I was just sitting here in Tanzania scrolling through BBC on my phone and was like, wow, that's my college roommate. Like what a crazy world, right?
Well, 6 billion people on the planet, 1.4 million of them, now 2 million stopped by to check in and see this video. So, I mean, the fire is absolutely spreading. I think part of the appeal of this community is that these are normal people making slightly unconventional choices and stacking enough of those together to get a radically different result in a short period, like 10 to 15 years. And when you see one, you're like, wow, that's cool. I probably couldn't do that. But when you see tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even millions of people making these slightly unconventional choices, then it's kind of this FOMO aspect almost gets added to this. Oh my goodness, I need to wake up and do something better. Oh my goodness, I need to make some changes. Oh my goodness, you don't know what you don't know until you do. It's time for me to start educating myself because they didn't teach this to me in school. This isn't something that's been passed down from my parents. I need to be the one to take accountability for my family and my family's future. And I want to get started now. And frankly, videos like that, media coverage like that, make it easier for the uninitiated, for someone that's never heard about this, someone to look a little deeper, and for people that are finding this community. And Brad, just kind of inside baseball on this particular clip. Last thing I'm going to say about it. People that have been following our show for a period of time know that we talk about Golden Boy, your car, virtually nonstop. It gets a mention almost as much as your local community pool. If you watch that 2-minute clip, you actually did see, just for half a second, the legendary Golden Boy, which is a black Honda Civic from 2003. Let's not get too excited, but worth pointing out.
Yes, with the paint now peeling off the top. I think Laura has pretty much told me I'm not allowed to say like, oh, but it looks nice still. And it does not look that nice anymore. But
it is not impressive.
No, it's not impressive at all. But I mean, we walk the walk. We drive old cars. We don't value new expensive cars we barely drive, honestly. I mean, Laura and I are both here most of the day. We go on little errands in our couple mile radius. I mean, what do we need new cars for? But Jonathan, I actually do have another little interesting kind of maybe frugal win of the week, we'll say, car related. So I mentioned a couple weeks ago how my windshield had a crack in it that expanded and I needed a new windshield. So I was going to go to Safelite and it was a $400 replacement fee. I'm like, this is crazy. So I posted in the Choosify local group here in Richmond, and my buddy Blake gave me his contact, who him and his dad have used for literally decades at this point. And this guy, Steve, was amazing. He came out, it was like less than half price. It was under $200. So now Laura's car has picked up, evidently, it seems like the seal on her windshield has come loose because she now has like water and ice on the inside of her car, which is not a good thing at all, needless to say. And this guy, Steve, came out again this morning and just talk about an upstanding person and just, you found the right person when they give you honest information that isn't self-serving. He's like, who did you have install this previously? I can tell this isn't the original windshield. And I said, oh, it was Safelite. And he's like, get in touch with Safelite this morning. This is definitely covered under the warranty. So there's a lifetime warranty evidently on the seal. He's like, they will come out and fix it or replace it for free under that warranty. You do not need me. I could stay here and do some work. I just want
to clarify. So he came out to your house, but then knowing he's walking away from money, told you that you could go back to this other place and get it done for free.
How amazing is that?
Do you have him on the recommended service providers list in the local group?
I definitely do. And it's funny, I mentioned him 2 days ago to my buddy Matt, and he's going to have this guy Steve come out. It's when you find these providers who go to the end of the earth to do the right thing for you, they deserve all the business in the world. And yeah, that's the beautiful thing about the local group with that recommended service provider, right? And hopefully all the local groups across the world are going to put together these resources. That's the big takeaway. Sure, I saved a couple $100, which is wonderful for me. It's all well and good. But man, when you can have tens upon tens of thousands of people saving money all across the world just because they're a member of the Choosify local group, that's a win on an incalculable level.
That is awesome. And if you're listening to this episode and you have not yet joined a local group, I have two kind of high level things that you need to do today. One is just go to choosify.com/start. You can find out more about how to start your path to financial independence with 5 easy things that you can do over the next week. And also, if you want to join a local group, you can go to choosify.com/local and you can find there's well over 200 local groups all around the world now. You can find a local group in your area, find a community of like-minded individuals. And think about the contrast, Brad, of what you're describing. On the one end, you've been featured on BBC, a video that's been watched over 2 million times. On the other end, you have a normal family. You're driving a 2003 Toyota Highlander and a 2003 Honda Civic. And you're raising your kids in a safe neighborhood, a middle-class neighborhood in Richmond, Virginia. You're living a normal life, but what you're doing is you're optimizing at the margins. And these margins, when you aggregate them together, lead to massively different results to the point where, again, quoting the title, you stop needing to work in your 30s. And as a community, this is what our community is doing. We're looking for the life optimization tactics that work for our family, work for our specific situation. I started to watch, if you have Netflix, I started to watch Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And the question being, does it spark joy? Well, to tie this to the episode, I'm going to have to be a little contrarian here. Does tidying up spark joy in my life? To be honest with you, it really doesn't. But I still take the time to walk behind my child and encourage them to tidy up and to clean up the Legos and all the little toys off the floor. out of a self-serving mentality because it's no fun to step on Legos at 7:30 in the morning before I've had my coffee. Like that sparks joy even less. So we tidy up. But what I hate out of all of this, what I've always hated, is that it's these little things that steal my soul, that suck up all my free time in that 5 hours that I have free in between the time that I sleep and I work. I mean, this is the normal paradigm. And to tie this to the episode with Bradley from this past week on Monday, when he broke down what he was committing to a job, what he was committing to sleep, what he was committing, like when he took both of those away, what he actually had left to do whatever, all the other things that he needed to do, it was about 5 hours a day. And that makes it, when you look at it that way, and I guess life is a choice in how you look at it. It's a matter of perspective. But when you look at it that way, I think that's a realistic way of looking at it. When you take all the little things that you do, you have to prepare your meals, you have to clean up, you have to do laundry, you have to do landscaping, you have to maintain all of your stuff, right? All these little life obligations add in. You think about how much time do you actually have left for you or for your relationships or for your kids. And that's when it gets depressing. That's when it gets depressing. Now, it's one thing if your job lights you up. It's one thing if you are fired up about being able to go to work every day. But if work is toxic, but it's high paying, if you've got golden handcuffs on, but that golden handcuffs is only leaving you with a few hours a day or less to commit to your family, maybe it's leaving you with no time, it doesn't feel sustainable. That's the place that Bradley found himself.
Yeah, and Jonathan, Bradley had some interesting quotes in there. And actually, when you're talking about Kondo and sparking joy, right? He said, often we get way down into the weeds. And what we forget to do is zoom out from time to time and say, hey, what are we actually doing? Is this the final goal here? And I think most of us can agree, and this may not be true for everyone, but I think most of us can agree that this is a pursuit of happiness. And what we're attempting to do is maximize the joy or happiness that we're getting out of this single lifetime that we get. And I just thought that was so powerful. And it really does tie into what you said. And he was saying, if his daughter, who now goes to sleep at 6:30 p.m., if he was getting home from a regular job at 6 o'clock, he would literally have 30 minutes with her every single day, Monday through Friday. He made an unconventional choice to go part-time. And he, obviously, this worked out well. He is making more than he was making. But for most people, and for his intention and his anticipation, he was going to make half of what he was making previously. And he was okay with that because him and his wife sat down and determined what is best for our life, not what's the conventional choice, not even what's going to get us to FI most quickly. That's what a lot of people do. It's a sprint to FI, but it doesn't have to be. You can take a step back and say, all right, are these years when my kids are young? Am I going to ever get these back? No. I mean, clearly you're not. So he determined, let's do this. Let's give this a whirl. I can always go back to full time if for some whatever reason this doesn't work out. But this is something I want to do for my family during these most important years. And I thought that was really impressive.
There is so much in this episode. I mean, both from creating your dream job to actually making the choice to go part-time. But I wanted to point out maybe something that's obvious, but it's one step away from what you just said. What if you have created a lifestyle that requires that you work 80 or 90 hours a week due to either lifestyle inflation or overwhelming debt? You've created a lifestyle that requires that you work that insane amount to maintain it. This is the danger of lifestyle inflation. This is why we're not the earn more podcast. We're the earn more, spend less, enjoy the journey podcast. This is why you have to focus on both sides. If you just focus on earning more so that you can live within your means, focus on earning more so you can live within your means, the counterpoint is you will always be working. You will always be tied to that lifestyle. Bradley's point, and this is the part that's so critical, by reeling in the lifestyle inflation, by controlling your expenses, it gives you options that you get to make value choices that are based on your best interest. If Bradley's life cost $140,000 a year to maintain, he couldn't have done this because he had the 2 new cars, because he had the massive house, because he had the vacation home, because he had the boat, because he had all the trappings of someone in life who has made it. He now has to work that forever to maintain it. And that's, quote, living within your means, but it's not getting ahead. If you can then focus on value, if you can reprioritize that, if you can crush your expenses, ruthlessly optimize for value, find a lifestyle that serves you, and do that for less, you can then make decisions like he was able to make. And this is when he talked about the power play, right? Think about the power that it gives you when you're not operating from a place of how am I going to pay the bills because I have all of this outstanding debt, you can then be aggressive with the jobs that you pursue, the opportunities that you pursue. And in many cases, I've seen this personally, and I've certainly seen it in other people's lives. When you're in that position, you end up making more. And someone might say to themselves, well, that's not fair. And I can't address that component, but I can say that I've seen that over and over again. So if I can't control the fairness of that, what you can control is looking at what other people have done and seeing if there's an aspect of that that you can emulate in your own life to get a similar result.
And Jonathan, what's funny about an interview like this is we spent maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20, talking about Salesforce, which I had heard of the company before, but we had no anticipation that we were going to talk about this during the podcast. But it was just so interesting. I could feel myself actually leaning in when I was re-listening to it because it was just the perfect FI hack. Bradley found this job. It wasn't what he went to school for necessarily, but he came out, he was making $40,000 a year. And what did he do? He worked really hard at his job. Like, this is like a novel thing. What's funny, he described what a normal workday is for someone sitting in an office. You take a little break here, you walk around the office, you have lunch for an hour, you talk to your coworkers. But what did Bradley do? He sat and worked and got additional certifications and learned. He said he outpaced his peers because he, quote, actually worked from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. He studied materials to get certifications. This is really cool. And it put him in a position where he had a lot of value. And when he decided to make this leap to potentially go part-time, he said, quote, you need to be in a position where you have nothing to lose, right? And that's the beautiful thing about FI. This is the prototypical FI story. He gained on his talent stack to the point where his $40,000 a year job turned into well over $100,000 in just a few short years by his early 20s, just because he worked hard. And who does that keep in mind? Bonnie Truax from episode 115, where she talked about she had this insane talent stack that she learned on the job. She had nothing to do with her IT job that she first got, and she eventually rose to be a director of IT because she worked hard. Deanna from episode 106, she talked about this as well. When she got back on her feet and got her first job, she's been getting, instead of the 2 to 3% raises, she's getting multiple double digits because she works hard, and people want those employees around who are bringing outsized value. So that's what Bradley said here. He was in this position where he had nothing to lose. And also, people are open to interesting and uncommon ideas, right? And Jonathan, you mentioned Office Space, and that's exactly what I thought of too. People are intrigued. What hiring manager has ever seen a guy like Bradley come in and pitch this random idea that I'm going to do basically my full-time job, go really, really hard from 8 a.m. until noon every single day, but I only want 50% of the income, right?
He's like
that's
a force
crazy,
of
Jonathan.
nature, man.
It's insane. It really is insane. So, I mean, it's just an impressive story.
And Brad, I want to spend a few minutes thinking through the stepwise process that Bradley actually implemented to pull off this incredible career hack. I mean, that is ultimately what we're talking about here. And I love that when you were kind of going through some of those other examples, you're laying the pattern, we're building on this. So you see the consistency, the principles work. You see them implemented, every single time. And actually, just funny little inside baseball here. We use our episode numbers to point people that are maybe the first episode they've listened to is this one with Bradley, and they want some more context. It's kind of like, hey, if you enjoyed this and you want more of this type of information, go listen to these other episodes. Apple Podcast actually told us, hey guys, can you take the numbers out of your titles? And to which we were basically like, absolutely not. We use those episode numbers to point people back to other episodes that build in these concepts. It's the most critical part of our entire infrastructure, is being able for you to easily go back and find other related content. Back to career hacking. What did I see him do first? First, I saw him leverage recruiters. We heard about this very recently, episode 115 with Grant from Millennial Money. He talked about how recruiters, looking for incentive alignment, recruiters' incentives is to get you to move from your current job to a new job. And in order for you to make that jump, you're going to need to be making more. So are you leveraging recruiters? Is that a viable option for your industry? That was huge. He leveraged that. And then what did he do? He actually took a slight pivot on that because he didn't want the offer that the recruiter had. He wanted a custom offer. He said, I need to get in front of a person that can actually make a decision. So then he figured out, what is my unique selling proposition? Well, first of all, I am 100% intensity. Like when you have me, you have me. This isn't coffee breaks. This isn't casual, going out for lunches, walking around the block, everything else. I am 100% focused. So he got in front of this decision maker and said, wow, you could pay me half as much and I am going to be twice as efficient. I mean, this is just a win-win, and they could see it. It was obvious. He created a situation where there was nothing for the employer to lose by to be willing to try this. And then in his own place, he was able to put these audacious requests out there because he personally had nothing to lose. Once he had a few of these under his belt, he essentially had created a consulting practice, and then it was easy for him to slowly start creating, essentially his own business, start an LLC. Like if you think through his stepwise process and break it down into its individual parts, he didn't start by starting his own business. He started by his work ethic, and then he learned how to package that and sell that to a decision maker. So many of us can lean on this. And I think when you tie that to the fact that this exact example, Salesforce is an option for people that don't want to go down the coding route. And if you think about it, Brad, we have been trying to build a portfolio of careers that might appeal to people in different places. Because while some people have the dream job and they just need to optimize it, how many other people say, my biggest struggle is just frankly that I can't frugalize anymore. I need to earn more. And so for those individuals, in one episode, we're not going to be able to cover every option, but over the next 5 years, 10 years, we are going to be able to document hundreds of different examples. So someone can move from their current financial picture and drastically change it. And then what happens once they've done that, they can then share with us their journey. And then we can then repurpose that and use that to encourage other people on their own journey. That is what this looks like. Position yourself for information that has the ability to transform your life.
Yeah, I hear you. And we're always looking for these outliers, which is why I think we spent so much time on Salesforce. This sounds like something that other people can replicate. We saw Nasima in episode 112, where she said you can be a nurse with an associate's degree and make well over 6 figures in the Bay Area. That's something cool. That's just, while that's not applicable to everybody, that is a neat thing to just mentally file away. Or Robert Farrington in episode 89 talked about how he was a store manager at Target and made, Jonathan, do you remember? It's like $180,000 or something like that. And he said
very close to 200,000. Yeah.
Yeah. And like that is not abnormal. So that's the beauty to me of crowdsourcing is you get these ideas and then people say, okay, well, maybe Target isn't going to work for me, but maybe Walmart will, or maybe some other store. These are applicable. And that's the beautiful part about this is you take lessons from these guests and you see how you can apply it in your own life.
And Brad, this next voicemail that I want to play is from Alyssa. She had a question and feedback on the particular episode. And I think really she's setting us up for, it's kind of going to be like a guiding light for us going into the future. So with that, let me go ahead and pull this up.
Hi, this is Alyssa, the military spouse. I've left a message before, but I just wanted to keep talking to you guys. I was wondering if you could do a podcast about who does not make a lot of money and still doing FI, because my husband and I have found a way, because he gets free rent and free healthcare through the military. I picked up a job in the federal government and we were able to save half of our income, and I hope to be FI at 45, and we're 25 right now. I just think it would be really cool. I am so shocked and so glad that somebody found a part-time job that paid $170,000. But honestly, that is nuts to me. Like seriously, I'm so happy for that guy, and I want him to teach me how to do it. And you guys did. So maybe I should just quit everything and find a job with, what was it? Some CRM company. Anyway, but we make $55,000 a year. We're able to save half our income, and it's really awesome. And we're just getting so excited, opening our Vanguard accounts and buying cars and making it work for us and our growing family. So thank you guys for all that you do, and keep up the great work.
Brad, this is exactly what I'm talking about. There's 2 parts of her voicemail that I love. One, the answer to her actual question, hey, could you find somebody that is pursuing FI on an income below 6 figures, right? Or on a smaller income? Yes, 100% yes. That is actively our pursuit. And actually, Brad, I think we have had several on over the last several months that we could actually reference back, including Missphiology, episode 106, and also in episode 84 with Montana Money Adventures. And there are, I think, 3 or 4 others over some 100-odd episodes that we've done. But to your larger point, the point being, can you do it again? Can you bring someone else on that's done it a different way? Yes, we're committed to that journey. To your other point, which is maybe I should just take your advice and you showed how to do it. Maybe I should just do it. Yes. I mean, I'm not saying you should do Salesforce, but should you completely write off the income side of the equation, especially if you have enough options to pursue earning more? I think that answer is obviously yes for all of us. Life isn't a snapshot. Where you are now isn't where you're going to be a year from now. If you look back 30 years from now and you're making exactly what you've made now, if that is a lifestyle choice, fine. I don't think you should do everything for the money. Not everything should be based on the money. But if you're only making exactly what you're making now 30 years from now, just because you weren't putting any thought into what else you could do, I think that's probably going to be a missed opportunity. So it's finding the balance, and I'm trying to thread this line. I'm sure, Brad, maybe you can come in behind me and clean this up a little bit, but I don't think that we only need to focus on the frugal side of the equation. It's a good idea to tackle the equation from both sides.
Yeah, and Jonathan, what you're getting at is limiting beliefs. How many people have limiting beliefs that, oh, I could never make 6 figures? Or even my family, the couple of us could never make 6 figures. Oh, it must be easy for people with 6 figures. Well, I mean, as we sadly know, many people making 6 figures save nothing. So you guys are already way ahead of the game on saving 50% of a $54,000 salary. But you shouldn't have these limiting beliefs that, oh, I can't do that, right? We've had so many people who have improved their situation through hard work and effort. I think that's pretty cool. It's just being open to what are these new situations that are going to come my way because I've stepped outside of my normal comfort zone and said, okay, if these people can do it, I can too. That's the beauty of hearing other people's stories. And listen, sometimes they're going to be aspirational. Sometimes it'll be, hey, even just the Target store manager, Robert, making $180,000. That sounds insane to me. But is it insane to be a store manager at Target? Could you work yourself up there over a 10 or 15-year career? I don't think that's impossible at all. But now it's aspirational because you know that that's real and there are other people doing that. So again, Jonathan, to me, that's the power of a story, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, there's so much here. I mean, if you're telling us that you have already figured out how to save 50% of your income on a salary that is below $60,000 a year, you've already figured out the hard part. I mean, honestly, so many people would look at that and say, well, that's impossible. I could never do that, so I can't do this. You've already figured out the hard part. So if you look at it that way, how are you going to view the world? If you look at it that way, I've already done the hard part. Now all I need to do is focus on increasing my income. And because we already have combated lifestyle inflation, because we've already crushed the frugal side of the equation, when we do earn more, the inevitable win, not if, but when, it's going to go so much farther. So I am grateful for you for calling in this voicemail and sharing it with our community. And I just wanted to point out for maybe many people that haven't gone actually to our website, there's a lot of you that actually do go to the website and look at the show notes there and listen to the episodes on the page. But for this episode, we created incredibly extensive show notes for this particular episode so that if you wanted to work through and get a system for what Bradley did and how you can replicate that, you will be able to do so. If you want to access the show notes for this episode, just go to choosefi.com/117, choosefi.com/117. And actually, we're committing to doing these more detailed show notes from here on out. So for every Monday and Friday episode, when you hear something incredibly actionable, just go to the website, find the latest episode, and you're going to be able to dive in and get all of those actionable details in full on depth every single week from here on out. If you want an easy way to find the show notes or the show link, if you're listening to an episode that you want to dive into more, find more resources, from here on out, you'll just be able to go to choosefi.com and just throw the 3-digit number in there. So if we're listening to episode 118, 119, whatever, just go to choosefi.com/118. And it'll take you to the show notes for that page. All right, Brad, I thought we could take a few minutes and actually bring in some feedback that we got on this episode from our community. And Kenneth on Facebook said, this episode resonated with me more than any other Choosify episode. I have been struggling to figure out how to cut back my hours and spend more time with my 2 sons who are already 9 and 6. I feel like their childhood is slipping through my fingers. As an aerospace engineer, I've never been able to negotiate or find part-time opportunities. I would love it if the Choosify community could come up with a repository of ideas similar to what was discussed in this show. I would gladly leave my six-figure income behind to change careers and work part-time from home, making enough money to support my family. Brad, Kenneth gets it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. One idea isn't enough, right? Because this exact idea is not going to work for everybody that listened to this episode. But now I would say we consistently have like 5 or 6 of these ideas. And over the next 12 to 36 months, I suspect that we will have 50 plus, if not more ideas, either mentioned in full on Monday or mentioned, explored on a Friday episode. We're going to be able to put together a portfolio. And then what we can do after the fact, and we're already doing this, is figuring out how we can bundle these together to create a portfolio of ideas, exactly like Kenneth is describing.
Yeah, Jonathan, Kenneth is certainly kind of reading my mind here, right? I mean, this is what I talked about 10 minutes ago, which is putting together this crowdsourced information, because you and I can't do this. We can maybe head this as figureheads on some level, right? We can say, okay, every local group should have this repository of local service providers. And hopefully the local admins and people in that group will put that together. And also we're trying, certainly in our best way, to put together lists of college hacks and career hacks and all these things, just aggregating this information. So I think that's something you and I have said, this is a big focus of ours in line with these local groups, is how can we get this information so it's ultra valuable on a day-to-day basis for members of the Choosify local groups. I think that is the key, is really making this so everybody can get the best information from all the other members of Choosify at their fingertips.
Vince says, I have a question for my tech professionals. I'm a sales manager at a growing company. We just found out that by year's end, 40% of the workforce is going to be cut and the work's going to be automated. Basically, I'm looking to get ahead of any fallout and learn Salesforce. I want to stay with this company and see this as a way to do so and also learn a relevant skill. I don't have much tech experience, but I do work on Salesforce daily. I've already looked into the trailhead path of learning this new skill. My question is, how feasible will it be for a rookie to learn Salesforce in 6 to 9 months' time? And what is your experience being a Salesforce admin? Tons of feedback on this particular episode. This is a community of people that is doing this. Bradley is actually in our Choosify Facebook group. So regardless of which path you end up taking, whether or not it's going to be something in Salesforce, something in coding, something in the trades, nursing, there are individuals that are already in this career path, already well on the path to FI. This isn't a competitive thing. This isn't a scarcity mindset. This isn't when you get this job, someone else loses it. This is someone that has leveraged this outlier event to achieve remarkable results and is willing to put a hand back and come alongside someone as a mentor and tell them what it is they figured out. You can help yourself and your family move to a better place if you start looking for these opportunities and start making decisions that change something about your financial picture. If it's not working right now, we're going to have to change something if we want to get a different result. Let's start looking for these opportunities and taking action. B says, I'm currently pursuing my Salesforce certification. I've been working as an accidental admin for 2+ years, and it really can be done without any tech experience. For the Salesforce admin path, they emphasize clicks, not code. They are also a great organization overall. Their annual conference, Dreamforce, is amazing. They have this 1-to-1-to-1 pledge where they pledge to give 1% of their time, product, and resources. A part of that includes the offer for nonprofits to use Salesforce for free for up to 10 years. I am currently doing a blend of Trailhead and Udemy class, which you can buy on sale for $10. Mimi says, I'm intrigued. I got my degree in computer science, but no coding. I left the field for something else, and now I'm thinking about Salesforce. This podcast was inspiring in so many ways. It spoke to me. Thank you for the episode. I think that over the next 6 months, tens of thousands of people heard this particular episode. Hundreds of thousands of people will listen to this episode over the next year or so. With that in mind, we are going to start getting feedback of somebody that listened to this episode and made a change, made a choice, and then we're going to be able to then get better with this information and be able to make it more accurate and more relevant for individuals that want to follow this path. All right, Brad, I thought we could take a few minutes and actually switch up our format a little bit and talk about what we want to do with our Friday roundups. Our guiding light has always been that this is a community crowdsource driven show. As the show grew bigger and had more moving parts, one of the limitations of actually bringing on that feedback has quite honestly been me and you, our organizational ability. And it became obvious that to continue to keep this a community-focused show, we're going to need some help. And so we have actually brought Zach onto the team. 90% of what he's going to do is going to be behind the scenes, aggregating your feedback on the episodes, looking for common things, ways to address maybe things that we missed or didn't cover. He's also going to be taking your questions and finding a way to get your questions on the show. And so with that in mind, he's actually going to be joining us on our Friday Roundup to mention some of the questions from the community, both on Facebook and Twitter and the blog over the last week. And so, yeah, with that, Zach, for the first time ever, welcome to the Choose FI Friday Roundup.
Hey, Brad and Jonathan, great to be on.
Yeah, Zach, we are super excited. This is going to be a big level up for this podcast and the community. There's so many essential pieces of feedback that we're getting, amazing threads in the Facebook group that Jonathan and I are just missing. And now with you on the job and trying to find these gems for us to talk about here on the podcast, like I said, it's just going to be a level up. So very, very excited about it. And yeah, let's get into it. What's the first piece of feedback or questions we have?
All right, guys. So we got a question from Tito on the Facebook group, and he says, I am going to be doing travel rewards at the end of the year. The problem is I don't spend a lot of money each month. If I made a large purchase and returned the item, would that count towards the amount I need to spend? I live in an area where I cannot pay my property tax or most utilities with a credit card, so I can't use that option.
Yeah, I think I can pay my property taxes with a credit card, but they charge me like a 2-point-something% fee to do so. So I'm always like, I don't know if I want to do that. All right, Brad, what do you got for us, man?
Yeah, no, that's tough. And I agree with you, Jonathan. There are many items that you can put on a credit card, but you might get charged a fee. Like I've heard people even putting their daycare expense on a credit card, and some get hit with a fee, some don't. So I would say investigate, and that's obviously one random little anecdote here, right? I would investigate any payments you make in life and see, are there ways to use a credit card, hopefully with no fee or with a minor fee? Are there ways to prepay items? Like I know my wife Laura and I, we spend money each year on, let's say, Amazon.com. So if I know we're going to make a purchase or just purchases over the year, and I need to hit a credit card spend for whatever reason, I just pre-purchase gift cards and I load my account at Amazon. And I mean, you can do that with utility bills, frankly, right? If your utilities, I guess Tito here is saying that he cannot use credit cards for utilities, but I know many people can, or Verizon or Comcast or something like that. If you want to prepay for a handful of months, no reason not to do that. So I think that is one kind of avenue of strategy. I want to caution, clearly his question in there said, if I made a large purchase and return the item, would that count towards the amount I need to spend? Absolutely not. You cannot game the system in any way. No one is advocating that. Please do not do anything like that. It will not count in any way, shape, or form. So these are legitimate purchases that you need to make on that credit card in the allotted time. So many credit cards will be, let's say, spend $3,000 in the first 3 months and you'll earn X bonus, let's say 50,000 airline miles or some such. You need to remember what those stipulations are. Also, while it says 90 days, that's generally from the date of approval. But I've noticed anecdotally that some of the credit card companies give you a little bit additional time. When they say 3 months, sometimes it's 100 days or thereabouts. So you might have some wiggle room there.
Well, I would just say, make sure you would send them a secure message, right? If you're going to be dabbling with that line.
Yeah, that is no question about it, Jonathan. Yeah, that was literally the next words out of my mouth.
I know, that's why I rushed to say it. That way I could get a word in.
Nice. Yeah, sorry, I go on and on about this travel word stuff. But obviously, Tito, on the one hand, it's great from a FI perspective that you don't spend a lot of money. But the short answer might just be, if you've investigated all of this and you just can't come up with enough spend to hit these requirements, then travel rewards is just not going to work right now, I would say. So again, that said, there are some requirements that are minimal. I've seen spend $1,000 in the first 3 months for some credit card bonuses. Now, they're not going to be, in many cases, the most lucrative ones, but they're still pretty darn good. So look into that. Figure out what you can spend. Is there some random large expense that's coming up in the near future that, okay, maybe we normally spend $500 a month, but we're going to spend an additional 1,000 or something. And that might put you in a different echelon where you could hit a different credit card bonus. So yeah, I mean, those would be all my considerations.
And Brad, practically, like for me, what we have been able to do is we can front load our grocery spends. Guess what? You are going to be spending monies on groceries, next month and the month after the month after. If you figure out a way around that, maybe sustainable gardening at home, and you get to the point where you don't need to buy groceries, then more power to you. But for most of us, 99.9% of us, we are going to be purchasing groceries. So in our case, just look at where you go. And we spend a lot of time at Costco, a lot of time at Wegmans. In Costco in particular, I know you can get Costco gift cards, no problem there. You can definitely use that for your minimum spend. And then basically you're just front loading some of your spending, no fees attached to that. Another one that I figured out is our auto insurance. We use USAA. And while normally I just pay my auto insurance month to month, if I am trying to hit a minimum spend and don't believe that I would get there just with normal spending, you can front load all of your auto insurance onto your card. Again, no fees attached. Your mileage may vary. See what I did there? But it's going to depend on your insurance provider, your auto insurance provider. I suspect, though, there's a high chance that you will be able to front load your auto insurance. So 2 ideas. Hopefully that is helpful. And thank you so much for the question.
Oh, so Jonathan, this in terms of life optimization, right? And trying to get a little bit better. I have a question for you. So I know USAA is fantastic with charging minimal fees and such. So this might not apply to you, but I know this will probably apply to many people, is when you talked about paying monthly. Generally, there are additional fees that you pay to pay monthly, just like for your regardless of whether you pay with a credit card or bank draft or whatever it may be. And I think a lot of people do that just because from a cash flow perspective, it's just easier to pay a monthly auto insurance or home insurance or whatever it may be. But if you pay in one lump sum, it's usually, you don't pay that service charge every month. I'm curious, do you know if you pay a service charge or if that's something like you should be paying monthly if you were going to, is that something you should be paying yearly if you were going to optimize to the utmost?
Yeah, USAA is awesome. I'm 99.9999. Basically, I'm totally certain I'm not paying fees on my auto insurance, but I will now be going back to double check because if so, I've been making a major life mistake this entire time. But no, I'm pretty sure they don't charge me any fees. USAA has been wonderful. And yeah, that usually comes on my radar. And I always try to avoid fees. We say control what you can control. And what can you control? You can control your expenses, you can control your taxes, and control your fees. The fees matter. And so obviously the big fees like index funds, investing in low cost index fund, avoiding high, egregious, actively managed fees. And then even more so, even with the small stuff, your bank fees, all these tiny little nitpicky charges, just be aware of where life is getting you. And actually, Brad, it's probably worth mentioning just because I saw this news article recently and we have talked about it. So all right, back up just a half a second. We always talk about VTSAX. And what we basically say is VTSAX is the, Kleenex of the tissue world. It's just a way for us to identify a marker. It kind of acts as a representative flag for all low-cost broad-based index funds. But certainly other companies have great low-cost index funds like Schwab and Fidelity. And over the period of the last 2 years, due to different life circumstances and opportunities, I have ended up with low-cost index funds at all 3 of these branches. My 401k is with Schwab. Vanguard has my taxable accounts and Fidelity is hosting my HSA. And Fidelity, over the last year, introduced a no-fee index fund, which was unheard of. It was a race to the bottom, but Fidelity jumped on the zero-fee index fund. And we had talked a little bit in a past episode about how it might not be quite as low as it looked because it wasn't quite as efficient from a capital gains perspective. And that was a particular conversation, but it's actually come on my radar recently that Fidelity is being investigated at the federal and the state level at some varying degree to look into some fees that have kind of snuck in and are being charged in ways that you don't even realize. Now, I'm not anti-Fidelity. I actually use Fidelity, but it was very interesting to me because we were making the case that, we are very partial to Vanguard. Vanguard may not be the lowest, but we trust their motivations for doing it just because of their background, their history. But that same goodwill, that same love may not be imparted to all of these other providers of low-cost index because it's a loss leader mentality. They're doing it because Vanguard did it. And that's basically it. If Vanguard weren't here, there's zero chance they would be doing it. And I'm curious, did you see that article and what were your thoughts?
Yeah, Jonathan, I honestly did not read about this, but it does speak to a fee might not be a fee, right? It's not always apples to apples. I think is probably the most succinct way of saying this, where you can just look at, okay, Vanguard's is 0.04% and Fidelity's is 0%. But as we discussed, what was it, a month or two ago about the Fidelity zero fee, there are potentially underlying fees there. And I think that's what you're getting at here. obviously, if this is being hidden, I mean, that gets into a whole separate issue. And if that's why they're being investigated by the Labor Department, then, hopefully they get to the bottom of this. But it's interesting you use that phrase Kleenex for kind of how we refer to VTSAX. And I hadn't seen that before this week when Frank, who's one of the most active and valuable members of our Facebook group, responded actually using that exact term, talking about VTSAX. And yeah, I mean, I think you and I both really do love Vanguard, but I think the important part here, and really the actionable takeaway for the audience, is we believe in low cost index funds because we believe that over a 30 to 50 year period, it is highly unlikely, approaching zero, that we, or most people, probably 99% of people, can beat the market over that type of period. And therefore, paying for expensive active management or a financial advisor, you're just cutting, in some cases, a third to a half off of your eventual net worth just because you tried to beat the market. And frankly, you're really not going to do it. So yeah, clearly that's the big takeaway for me whenever we're talking about index funds.
And dude, I totally got it's the Kleenex of tissue paper from Frank. That's exactly. And I follow all of Frank's comments on the Choosify Facebook group because I find his comments so insightful and frankly educational for me. But this week, what was my biggest educational takeaway from Frank? It was that VTSAX is the Kleenex of the tissue paper world. 100%. Put it down in the notes. All right, Zach, you got another question for us, man?
Yeah. All right. So we got Gage on the Facebook group also asks, curious of people's thoughts and methods out there. I have been trying to figure out a good way to budget or pool me and my wife's income. So for example, currently we have a bill account for our fixed expenses and we both add an amount each month that covers that cost. While the method works and is okay, we have been considering changing it up to something different, like a single joint account and a bill account. How does everyone else manage their accounts with their significant others?
I love this. And actually, I want to give people that are listening to this episode a little bit of foreshadowing here. We are going to be talking with Gene Shatsky in one or two episodes. It's going to be episode 120. And we're going to be talking about this in depth. So definitely stay tuned for that. But I wanted to comment on kind of our personal iteration process. And I'd love to get Brad's feedback as well. Personally, when my wife and I started, we both had our own separate accounts and then we had one joint account. And then I went down this crazy path of trying to do basically like a digital envelope system. So if you're come from the Dave Ramsey community, you know about envelopes. Like actual physical envelopes is incredibly cumbersome and unwieldy to use. It may work, but it feels pretty broken in a digital age. And I'm a very digital guy. So I couldn't do that, but I like the idea of doing digital envelopes. So I basically created, and please don't do this, I'm not telling you to do this, I'm just saying this is what I did as an adaptation. I created 7 bank accounts, again, using USAA, they don't have any fees. And I would use these accounts specifically for the purpose that they were intended. So maybe and Brad's laughing at me. I can hear him laughing at me, but I had like a bills account. I had a joint account. I had, whatever, pick your different categories, whatever you would have written on your envelope as your category. This is what they were. And I actually used that pretty effectively for a period of several years while I was like actively trying to pay down my debt. I would do this, essentially what came to zero-based budgeting, assign all these dollars and everything else went to pay debt. So I had no money left essentially at the end of the month projected to spend. Over time, that became increasingly too complicated for a life that was getting much simpler, especially as I had paid off all of our debt. And now essentially we have, I would say 2 to 3 accounts, but all of our money goes into one account. And then from that subset, a portion will then go back out to discretionary accounts, which is it's our agreed amount that we have to do with what we want. So Brad, I'd be curious, and I know you haven't gone through all the chaos of my multiple iterations. What is you and Laura's process?
Laura and I have pretty much had the same process throughout our entire marriage. So we very early on at the very first, I was going to say very early on, but literally at the very first, we combined everything. It is all just gone into one pot and we've paid all of our bills out of our checking account. And yeah, I mean, like I've mentioned previously on the podcast, we don't budget or do anything like that. I've never had a budget. I know, I think you were more along the lines of budgeting being important to, I guess, how you went about your financial life. But for whatever reason, that just never appealed to us. We just lumped every single thing together and treated ourselves as one from day one of the marriage. So from that perspective, it's been really, really easy because there's no gymnastics to go through of, oh, we're going to split this bill or I pay this percentage. And I know many people do that and that works for their lives. And I think that is really at the end of the day, it ultimately doesn't matter how you and I do it, Jonathan. Other than that, it might be illustrative for somebody. But what matters is, how does this work for your life? And there are many different ways to go about it. And just figure out, what I would say is, move towards simplicity. I think that is kind of one of the guiding lights in my life, is move towards simplicity. And if you're doing gymnastics with your money every month just to make it work out, when at the end of the day, it's maybe all one pot, I would probably move toward that. Like, that would be my advice if you ask me for specific concrete advice. But at the end of the day, do what works for you.
And know thyself. That's a common theme that we've seen over and over again. So it is a very personal decision. And we're going to save the rest of this conversation. If that question appealed to you, if you want to explore that a little bit further, you need to listen when we release it in just a couple weeks here. You need to listen to episode 120 to me with Gene Chatsky. It is going to be we've recorded it. I just know it is an incredible episode. I cannot wait to share it with you guys. All right, Zach, thank you for sharing these questions with us. And for our community, let them know if they want to have their question featured on a Friday Roundup. What is the best way to make that happen?
So if you want your questions on the show, tweet to us or make a post in the Facebook group with the hashtag mailbag. That'll just make it really easy for us to find your questions and make sure they get onto the show.
All right, great. You can find our Facebook group. You can just go to chooseify.com/Facebook. And if you want to send us a tweet and have it included, what is it, 246 characters or less, something in that range. I'm not totally up to it. You can just tweet at chooseify, hashtag mailbag. Zach, I'm so excited that you're joining us on the show and look forward to next time.
All right, me too.
Brad, I thought we could take a few minutes and talk about some of the incredible, cool events that went on over the past week and are coming up in the near future with our Chooseify local groups. The Houston local group, if you remember, they were going to meet up with Alan Donegan and help him put together a pop-up business school. That happened on February 28th. On March 23rd, a few of their members are going to be helping build a raised garden at another community member's home and have invited them to stop by and ask questions or hang out, doing a grill out, have some beverages. Going to be a very cool event for the community. The Tucson group had a casual happy hour meetup with Physician on Fire on February 28th. Portland is planning a March meetup with Big Earn from Early Retirement Now, who's going to be doing a Q&A on sequence of return risk. The date and location are going to be determined in the very near future, but if you are near or around the Portland area, definitely join the Portland local group to get information on that. The Honolulu group actually had a meeting this past week on the 5th. The Greater Baltimore group is having a Library Fi monthly meeting on the 16th of March with an optional lunch afterwards. Richmond is celebrating Pi Day with a meetup. Love the creativity and hope that I'm able to be there for that one. Chooseify Maine is having their first meeting on March 24th and is going to be discussing tax tips and optimizations for the Fi community. Brad, here's the part that's really cool. New Facebook groups over the last week. There is now a Calgary, Alberta, a Modesto, California, Hudson Valley, Daytona Beach, Winston-Salem, Ann Arbor, Bowling Green, Kitsap Peninsula, Morgantown, West Virginia, Little Rock, and St. George. We also got our North Dakota group started this past week. So now there is a local group in every single state in the United States. So we have the domestic country completely covered, and it's spreading around the world.
That is amazing. To see that many groups pop up in the last week, really, really cool.
I hope when you hear these events, one of two things happen. One, if you're not involved with a local group, you go and you join our local community. Go to chooseify.com/local. And if you're in a local community and you're hearing about this event, you participate and enjoy the experience. And I hope you get as much value out of them as I do. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. All right, my friends, unfortunately, that is going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And there's 3 books that we offer. The first is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. And the third book from Vincent Puglisi, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing, all you need to do, just go to chooseify.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, leave us a short written review, and then send us an email to feedback@chooseify.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday Roundup. Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 1 winner today, and the winner is Genshin. And she called this podcast incredibly helpful and engaging. I'm a recent college grad who stumbled upon Dave Ramsey's podcast during my grad school education. I became incredibly focused on paying off my student loans after graduation, but found myself feeling lost when I did reach that 0 loan balance. After listening to the first episode of Chooseify, I felt a sense of direction stir up in me again. Thanks to this podcast, I'm actively developing what my best life would look like, financially, socially, and intellectually. Brad and Jonathan lead thorough but incredibly engaging discussions on ways to take control of our lives and live with intention. Hats off to both of you for developing such a wonderful, inspiring resource for those of us ready to reshape our lives for the better. It is so meaningful to have a community where people can share ideas on all aspects of finance, health, and general community.
All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.